Hey, Catholic Divas. Mama Vicky and Mama Jane are a little busy this week with confirmation and visiting family. And so we thought it would be fun for you to listen to an interview that Mama Jane did with the Deliberate Day podcast. If you haven't heard them, I highly recommend that you go find the Deliberate Day. Brittany White and Tiffany Holler, they are fantastic. So enjoy this interview.
Welcome back to the Deliberate Day podcast, your podcast for mamas of many. We are your hosts. I am Brittany.
And I'm Tiffany.
And Mama, we are so happy to have you here with us.
And because you're a woman, most of our listeners are,
Yes.
Your body moves within a cycle each month.
And this has an impact on you, your relationships, your family, and the rhythm in your home.
And that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. In fact, it's a beautiful thing because it's how we were created. And today we're going to share a little bit of wisdom and understanding about how your cycle shows up in various ways and how we can best care for ourselves in these different phases of our cycle.
And we have a seasoned wife and mother of more than 37 years here with us.
You guys, she's homeschooled and she's lived the public school life with her 5 children, and she is now the feminine genius behind Wisdom Wellness Coaching and the podcast Cycles and Sanctity.
She has a heart for teaching women more about their fertility and how their cycles can help them grow in holiness.
And she's just recently started a new program in perimenopause and menopause. So you mamas, she is a jack of all trades, and I am so excited to welcome Mama Jane to the podcast.
Thank you. You guys are doing such great work. Such great work. I love listening to you. I love watching you on Instagram. I'm not an Instagrammer very well, but your recipes encourage me, and I'm almost missing the fact that I don't have, a house full of kids anymore. I'm like, where were you guys? That's okay, because I can pass it on to other people that are raising their children, and it's just so
Absolutely.
beautiful. I want to just commend both of you for the good work that you guys are doing as well.
Oh, thank you. Your
Thank
words
you.
mean so much to us. We
Yes.
appreciate that. All right, we are going to start off with a bang, and we would love to just have you start us off with the basics, as in, can you tell us what the phases of a woman's cycle are, and then what to expect in each cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mystery of, unfortunately, our education system is that when we say cycle, most women think period. Now, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Billings ovulation method instructor, and so we don't say period. Period is a vernacular term. We call it a menstruation. And I'm going to get into a little bit later of why we say that. So we start the cycle with a menstruation, and that's actually shedding the blood from the last cycle. It's actually, if you look at it, it's actually the ending of the other cycle. But I always tell people, because scientists needed some sort of visual thing, we start the day on day one. And, when you get pregnant or you go into the doctor, they always ask you, when was the first day of your last menstrual period, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that is the first phase of the cycle. It's the shedding of the blood because there was no baby conceived. And ideally, it should maybe be light cramps. It should be lasting anywhere between 3 and maybe 7 days. And, it's a time of reflection. In my podcast, I always recommend women that, again, this is the shedding, right? And so I recommend a good spiritual practice is to go to confession, because all of these things, a lot of times we find that we're a little bit more sensitive. And scientists have actually proven that when a woman is menstruating, her sight sometimes is like, the colors that she sees are brighter, the sounds are brighter. Yeah, this is really cool, isn't it? Like, it's amazing, huh?
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. But we're also sensitive to emotions, right? Like, how many
Mm-hmm.
times as teenagers people would be rolling their eyes because we'd be on our period, and they wouldn't honor the phase.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I recommend with women is, because, like I said, this is an internal time. This is a time to go inward. So allowing yourself that self-care, allowing yourself to go to bed early, allowing yourself to, have the chocolate, have the dark chocolate, because nutritionally, you'll need more carbs during that time. So, this is a really good fact for mamas as far as like when they're cooking, right? Is to maybe make extra brown rice, or maybe you're craving the quinoa, healthy carbs that are going to be good for your body,
Mhm.
right? And during that time, your estrogen and your progesterone are low. And then after we've shed all the blood, we go into the second phase of the cycle, which in the Billings ovulation method, we call this the BIP, the basic infertile pattern. So your cervix is closed, your estrogen and your progesterone are low, they're not moving, there's no movement in the ovaries, and you're starting to feel a little bit better. This is usually, for as an instructor, this is what we look for at the beginning so that a woman can understand this is my basic infertile pattern, and then there's something different, because the basic infertile pattern is just nothing. As far as spiritual practices, I usually recommend this is the time to go to practice your rosary. And especially, I want to, because your audience are mamas, the basic infertile pattern can last many months if you're breastfeeding.
Mhm.
This is what breastfeeding does. Breastfeeding actually suppresses the estrogen and the progesterone because you are feeding another child. And so for months, this is why a woman will not have menstruation, because there's no ovarian activity. And this is how you can naturally space your children through breastfeeding. Okay. And then there's a whole levels of breastfeeding and what will instigate. And basically, what I tell people, the basic thing is with breastfeeding is supply and demand. The more you breastfeed, the more your body knows that you are feeding a baby. The less you breastfeed, then your body is instigated like, oh, okay, well, maybe we're not the babies, and that is where each woman is individual. It could be one feeding that you less, and then all of a sudden your ovarian starts to act up, or it could be a lot. That is the beauty of the basic infertile pattern. Then something happens. There's this moment of sudden change. And what's happening is the follicles are starting to wake up. And so they're starting to develop in the ovaries. And so now you're in what will be considered like the fertile phase. And this, for the Billings ovulation, it's a changing, developing pattern. And so I equate it to the ocean. You guys live near the ocean. Those crescent
Mhm.
waves, those waves that the surfers want to ride, they rise, they rise, they rise, and then they crash,
Mhm.
right? And so that's what the ovulatory phase is. The follicles are developing, they're developing, the estrogen's getting higher and higher until what we call it is a peak. The estrogen peaks, and that's the moment that the egg is released from the ovary. That's the moment of ovulation. The thing we have to understand is most women are taught our period is the main thing in our cycle, but in
Mhm.
actuality, ovulation is the main event of our cycle. And when women are not ovulating, now I'm not talking about breastfeeding or pregnancy, I'm talking about
Mhm.
something else like using contraception or hormonal imbalances. If you're not ovulating, then your body's not healthy. And they've done studies that women who are not ovulating have higher risk of heart disease, osteoporosis. I mean, there's so many things that it affects our bodies, which is why it's so important to understand when am I ovulating? Have I actually ovulated?
That's fascinating.
Isn't it? I mean, okay, so one other cool thing I have to tell you. This is when I first started. I started studying in 2018, and in 2019, the US women's soccer team that won the world champion, they actually had someone like me, a fertility educator, on the team, and they would train each woman according to their cycle.
What?
Is that
That is
amazing?
so
Yes, and
cool.
all the women were off contraception. This is the beauty. Now, I start jumping up and down about ovulatory phase, because as entrepreneurs, this is the time of our co-creation. This is when we have a lot of energy, we feel great, our skin feels great, our hair looks great. And it's so funny because when I was in college, I used to run. And then I joined the ROTC at Florida State, and I could do such a great, and I didn't know this. Like all of a sudden I'd have a personal
Mhm.
best and I would like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it." And then all of a sudden boom, it dropped again. I didn't understand it because I didn't understand my cycle. And I look back and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I was probably ovulating when I was doing all of that amazing stuff." So that is the time that I tell women, go create, go write the book, go write the music, go paint the bathroom or whatever the creativity you're going to do. In the kitchen, you get excited, you've got more energy,
Yeah.
you can handle the kids,
Mhm.
right? As I always say, you're a little friskier with the relationship. But yeah, it's a beautiful time, and it's just so amazing that we have this ability with our bodies. The spiritual practice that I talk about in my podcast at this phase is mass, because if you think about it, the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith, right? And
Yeah.
that's what happens is we peak, our ovulation it peaks, our egg is released, and so it's like this building up, building up, building up. Yes, go to mass. So then what happens is, so the egg is released, the estrogen drops a little bit, and then the progesterone starts to rise and the estrogen rises. Now we shift into the fourth phase, which is the luteal phase. Now, this is a really interesting phase. It took me a while when I was studying as an instructor because I didn't understand the nuance. Once peak has arrived, the day after peak starts the luteal phase. And the luteal phase is normally anywhere between 11 and 16 days. Now, there's 3 of those days, those first 3 days of the luteal phase, we still, as for Billings instructors, still count that as a part of the ovulatory phase, because when we say peak, we talk about estrogen. And sometimes 80% of the time, ovulation actually occurs on peak, but 20% of the time, it'll occur either on the day after peak or the second day after peak. So we have that third day, and that's kind of like what I call the safety window, those 3
Yeah.
days, whether you're trying to achieve pregnancy or you're trying to avoid pregnancy. That's really important. That's the key moments.
Mhm.
Once you've entered into the fourth day of the luteal phase, then we know the cervix is closed. If the egg was not fertilized, it's dead. And now our progesterone should still be up, because now I always say this is the wonderment phase, especially those who are trying to conceive. As you know, many of my clients have been infertile couples because of my own infertility. And the spiritual practice I talk about is adoration, because it's the kind of the quietness. There's a calmness. The progesterone kind of calms us down. And again, it's 11 to 16 days. And then, depending on how quickly the progesterone drops right before menstruation, is when we get PMS symptoms. And so when we feel that, it's like, oh, my progesterone's dropping really fast. And this is kind of like like I said, I kind of consider it the waiting period, because again, especially for me, when I was infertile for 7 years, every month I would like hold my breath, like, am I pregnant? Am I not pregnant? And then, I would get my period and I would cry for a few days, and, you know,
Yeah.
and that was that. And then we would try again. So the luteal phase is a really important phase. The other thing I want to share with women, if a woman has had miscarriages, my recommendation is to go and talk to their OBGYN and check their progesterone those first days of pregnancy. That can save a baby.
Mhm.
And I actually have a client. It's a crazy, crazy story. She actually only had one fallopian tube because of some contraceptive sickness, and they had to actually cut one of her fallopian tubes. So while she was ovulating on that side, it wasn't going through. There was no way that the sperm could meet. So she kind of learned which side would be ovulating, and she was able to get pregnant. She'd had 2 miscarriages before, and I told her, go to the OBGYN right now, check progesterone. She was able to carry that baby to term. And, then I hadn't seen her. And then she let me know that she got pregnant in another, and that baby is,
Oh.
yeah, like 9 months old now, I think, almost a year.
Oh.
And it's just so, so amazing. You know, it's just so beautiful. So progesterone is so, so important. And then, and so, yeah, so that kind of, as far as like nutritional, that's really kind of where you need a little bit more protein and, healthy fats. Now, that's another thing I'm going to share with you. I have had many young women, young 20 something women that are not sexually active, and their periods have just stopped and they're just like, Mama Jane's, what's going on? My first client, she was Catholic, she was a virgin, she didn't want to go to an OBGYN. She's like, I know they're going to put me on the pill. I don't want to do that. So we worked with it. And then all of a sudden it was a Holy Spirit moment. I said, you're a runner, aren't you? And she said, yeah. And I said, do you know what your body fat is? And she said, no. And I said, okay, you need omegas. You need omegas. And so I just gave her some recommendations. I gave her a recommendation on some seeds. There's a gal, it's called Funk It Wellness, because they started during COVID, but she has organic seeds and she teaches you, she's a dietitian. It's ground seeds, and you just take some from menstruation to ovulation, and then the other bag is from ovulation to menstruation. And within a few weeks she called me and said, "Oh my goodness, I got my period." Isn't that crazy?
It is really
Yeah,
amazing.
so, I mean, it's so fascinating on how sensitive our bodies can be based on what we're providing and what we're not providing.
Okay, so we just got I need to recap
I know.
very quickly for our mamas out there. Okay, because I've overheard Brittany talking to people. Actually, I've been present on text feeds because we know women who have dealt with miscarriage. And Brittany herself has dealt with miscarriage and had to do
Yeah,
progesterone,
I'm a
right?
success story for progesterone, and when I speak to women who have miscarriages, I always tell them, like, have them check your progesterone levels. And it was
Mhm,
actually an old nurse who told me to do that. And she was
mhm.
like, start taking a baby aspirin a day, and she's like, go in and have them check your progesterone levels. And when I did that, I had two miscarriages, and then my third baby, who is my oldest son right now living, we were able to carry him to term. And
Yeah.
I it was amazing to me that no one, none of the doctors I was seeing or the people in the hospital ever gave me that information until I ran into a nurse. Like, I had no connection to her otherwise, just God sent her to me. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry I interrupted you because I
No,
took it
I
over, but I
yes.
get very passionate about progesterone and miscarriage and everything. But the fact that our bodies are so well balanced, are so well made. And we have another friend right now who's trying to work with her hormones because she had a NICU baby and there's just a lot that's off right now. And she's looking into seeding as well. And so I'm fascinated that you talked about that. I feel like,
Okay.
holy cow, I could just pick your brain forever. But I really did. I
I
interrupted you,
didn't
Tiffany.
even
So
know she was looking into that. Okay, but I just want like
recap, yes.
I did not want anyone to miss that because
Mm-hmm.
number 1, we are all our own advocates. And
Yes.
and I'm a caregiver, and so I'm an advocate for another individual, but we really have to be our own advocates because like Mama Jane, you have wisdom that we all need,
Mm-hmm.
but this is wisdom that should be well known by every woman, and it should be well known by every doctor who sees women,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you should not have women out there just randomly hearing about progesterone from a friend or
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
from a nurse who God sent, of course,
Yeah.
obviously, but that should be widely known. So we
Mhm.
need to share this information with our people
Mhm. No,
as
absolutely.
yeah.
And so, let me share with you, when I do have a fertility client, and especially those who are trying to get pregnant, I always tell them the first thing I want to find out is, number one, are you ovulating? Can we identify ovulation through peak? And number
Mm-hmm.
two, let's see what your luteal phase is so that your progesterone is well,
Mm-hmm.
because those are the two things. The estrogen is for ovulation, and the progesterone is to, keep the baby if we need to,
Mm-hmm.
if we have a baby or whatever. And they work so well. Now, I will say, that's my limitation. I don't get into thyroid and
Mm-hmm.
adrenals and all of that. And I know my own story was that I was undiagnosed low thyroid for years. And I kept telling them, like, hey, look at all of these symptoms of low thyroid, and infertility is the last one. And I have every single symptom. Oh, no, no, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. And it was through a friend who did herbs. And we've talked about it since then. She's like, I don't even know what I gave you. She just brought over a box of bottles and she had a little chart and she's like, this is you're going to take in the morning and the evening. And I was just ready to do anything. And it was just enough to kick my system. So I always say that I have my 7 years of fasting and 7 years of feasting.
Oh.
And I'm going to give you another little tip, a little spiritual tip. One of the things that I advocate is when a woman is having her menstruation, if she can, to offer that in the union of Jesus's blood for specific people, for those who are contemplating abortion, for those who are in abusive relationships, and that was part of my own practice. And Saint Therese talks about giving up, little things, right? She's like, if you have 2 teaspoons of sugar in your coffee, just use one and offer that up. Like we can just do little things. We're little souls. And that was
Yeah.
how so anyway, that's, yeah, I got off on a tangent. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, we all got off on that one. And I love that you bring in so much beauty, because I think one of the things that we as Catholics do pretty well is to embrace suffering and use it for people outside of ourselves. And I've always appreciated that, maybe not in the moment as much as I wish I would have appreciated it. But it's beautiful when you start noticing all of the small and big ways that we can offer ourselves and our suffering, to unite it with Jesus' suffering on the cross, to unite it with his bloodshed, to unite it with all of these beautiful intentions. But bringing it back to the cycles, you were talking about doing the Billings method. So, what do you recommend as the best way for moms to log and keep track of their cycles then?
So, the Billings method, one of the things I love about the Billings method is that it's very Ignatian, in that St. Ignatius really talks about the discerning of the spirits, right? And kind of just evaluating where you're at. And really, I mean, they could almost do it just on a calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is some finesse. I do recommend an instructor because sometimes our brains, get a little bit wonky. That's why I'm a Catholic mindset coach as well as a Billings instructor, because I know a lot of it is in the drama, what we're thinking of ourselves. Like, oh, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I don't know what our body is. But really, basic Billings is it the same or has it changed? And that is so Ignatian, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I with the Lord or am I not with the Lord? Like the evening examine with Billings, we recommend you kind of make these observations throughout the day, just kind of mental notes, like what's the sensation at the vulva? And the vulva, just to get a little graphic, is the outward lip, and do it while you're moving. So you have that movement standing up. Many other methods like recommend that, like while you're going to the bathroom. But if you think about it, and you both have children, you've both birthed, when you're sitting on the potty, your hips get up, and so things come down. So it's not a true observation. And so I just tell people, just make the observations without judgment. That's interesting. Okay, I feel a little sticky. And then you kind of take an overview. This is where that Ignatian, like you take an overview of those 3 or 4 observations throughout the day and say, what was the overall sensation today? Was
Yeah.
it more dry, or was there a little, and again, that the ovulatory phase is that changing, developing pattern, ending in slippery, and then it comes down. So it has to be changing, it has to be developing. So that's why I love that visual of the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
the crashing wave, right? Like you talk to a surfer and they can see that wave developing way out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we get. We like, oh, something's changed now. So yeah, they could just simply put it on their calendar if they wanted to. There is a website, it's called nfpcharting.com, and they
Okay.
can actually start charting with the proper stickers that we have. The nice part about that is they can also look for an instructor, and I'm listed there, and then they can reach out. And it really helped when that was developed before COVID, because it was a way that, like, most of my clients now are on Zoom, and I can pull up and we can both look at the chart rather than bringing in a chart to someone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nice. But again, it's patterns. Billings is all about patterns. What is your personal pattern? Dr. Lynn Billings had a saying, every woman is unique and every cycle is unique. And that's the other part of it, is that you don't look at last month's cycle and think, oh, I'm going to ovulate on day 14. You don't know that. Did you sleep well? Did you eat more carbs? Did you travel? I mean, there's so many. Are you on medication that you're not normally on? There's so
Yeah.
many things that can shift. And so we just make these observations.
I just think it's such an incredible gift to women to be able to look at our cycles that way and to really be a student of your body. We talk all the time on the podcast about being a student of our children, being a student of our families, being a student of our husbands. We really have to be a student of ourselves too. And this is such a huge way because, just like you were saying, it affects so many different factors. There are big health things it affects, but there are also small emotional and sometimes very big emotional things that get affected. And to know that you need more sleep during certain phases, to know that you need more protein during a certain phase. This information, how vital and how incredibly powerful is it in the hands of the people who really need it? But talk to us.
And I have a tendency to like fire hose people, so I apologize.
Bring it on. Talk to us about how can we create rhythms in our lives that kind of support us in the different phases of our cycles?
Yes, I love that question, Brittany, because, again, going back to the four phases. So the menstruation, again, is that reflective, is that quiet time. So maybe we pull in a little bit, we're less active.
Mm-hmm.
Stretching is for exercise, more stretches rather than crunches and things like that, but with our family as well, right? And that's one of the things that I loved about homeschooling, is that I got to be in control of how
Mm-hmm.
the family environment was going to be,
Yeah.
right? And so maybe having a softer night, maybe having a movie night with the girls if you can, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe celebrating a little bit with a glass of wine. It's a tender moment. And again, it's each woman. And so some women, because of their emotional shedding, they need their husband to give them a hug and to just cuddle with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some women are just like, no, get away from me, you know. But again, that's part of that mental, like, what are we thinking about and what are our emotions telling us? And have we processed our emotions properly? And maybe it brings up memories. Dr. Bob Schutz from Tallahassee, he talks a lot about, our healing our wounds. So that's kind of one of those things. And then, of course, BIP is kind of like almost getting ready. It's like the transition. And then, like I said, ovulation, that can be the busy time. And, I can bake 4 loaves of bread and I can do all these things. I can do, 10 loads of laundry or record a bunch of podcasts. Actually, I've actually heard a number of fertility educators talk to entrepreneurs, like, schedule your speaking engagements when you are ovulating, because you're on. Write the book, write the chapter, record the podcast, do whatever you need to do. Get out there in social media because you are on. Can you imagine if we gave our women, our college women, this?
Oh,
I'm going to write that paper when I'm, in a couple of days when I start feeling better,
Yes.
right?
Be
Can you
phenomenal.
imagine that? It would be phenomenal.
In business and in everything, like you said, as a runner, and you're like getting your best, and then it feels like failure when you can't recreate that. I know that I'll go in a phase
Mhm.
where I'll be like on fire. I'm posting on Instagram. I'm getting reels out. I'm doing all the things homeschooling. I'm like messaging Tiffany, all the things. I'm responding to people. And then literally the next week, I'm a completely different human being. I'm like, I'm not productive. I don't have energy. I'm I'm not very happy.
all is
And
lost.
all is lost. We should just quit businessing.
We're done.
And when you have the knowledge to know, oh, this is my body responding in a way that it's meant to be responding, but also I might be
Mhm.
allowing myself to wallow more than is necessary. I might be giving into just wanting to stay in bed all day, and to kind of balance that out.
Yeah.
Tiffany definitely knows because I start panicking about everything we're doing in the business. And she's like, whoa, give it 3 days. And always I'm like, oh, you're right. You're totally right. That's where I'm at. So
Yeah. But
But
it's
isn't that freeing, Brittany? I mean,
It
that
is
how
freeing.
freeing is that when you know what's going on with your body and
Yes.
you can connect the
Mhm.
dots.
Yes, and it's so freeing to know, "Oh, I'm exhausted and I get to give myself rest right now because this is what my body is saying
Yes.
it needs right now." And
Yes.
I'll tend to get really hungry for, like, 2 or 3 days, and
Yep.
now that I'm paying attention, it's not like, "Wow, I've just become a cow overnight." It's like, "Oh, my body's saying, 'Hey, I need more to eat right now, so please feed me because
Yes.
I'm gearing up to let you have a baby.'" So
Ovulate. That's
exactly,
right.
like, "I'm trying to prepare your body, so let me have good food, and then after that, I'll leave you alone, and
yeah.
you go back to eating like normal, and it's not gonna make a big difference." All of that is so powerful, it's so freeing, and it's empowering is what it is. It's very
Mhm.
empowering to understand your body so much better, and especially to understand what's not right with your body, to know when you're not ovulating, to know when you're suddenly not having progesterone spike in your body and you're not feeling any of that kind of calmness and it's just madness for all of your luteal phase. Like, that's not normal for me.
Mhm.
So there's something that's not quite
Mhm.
right here, and I am empowered enough to know that I can go find a fix for that, and like she said, advocate for myself. Huge,
Yeah,
huge, huge,
it
huge
is.
difference.
I'm gonna add one more thought here just because as I mentioned, I'm transitioning and really serving the menopausal women.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who have ended their cycle, because we have a continuum, we have a moment that we start. By the way, a menstruation of a young girl is called menarche, and then and menopause is medically considered when a woman has not had a menstruation for 12 months.
Okay.
Oh.
So, and that's another thing because that's another thing about the progesterone is that the luteal phase might be short and but the BIP might be long during that phase and that's what I look at. But for those of us who have, I'm done, like I went through menopause 54, so I'm 60, I still use the because you talked about rhythms, right?
Mm-hmm.
I use the luteal rhythm. So when it's a full moon, I treat it as my ovulation. And when it's a new moon, I treat it as a menstruation. And I have a belief, this is just my own belief. I've done a little bit of studying on it, but I really feel like that was how our ancient mothers, because we were so much more connected to the earth, right? We didn't
Mm-hmm.
have electricity 24/7. We're so connected. There was a rhythm to the phases of the seasons. And so that's what I always recommend to postmenopausal women. And I've actually started noticing that because like I think in a few days it'll be a full moon. I think it's on the weekend. I was looking and I've noticed myself this week before we did this recording, I was at the gym with my trainer and she was like, "Did you notice I added more weight?" I'm like, "I didn't notice." She goes, "You're doing awesome." And I realized, like, oh, yeah, of course, because my body is, even though my hormones are kind of dead, I've kind of trained my body to act in those rhythms. And when it's a new moon is a little bit harder to you just have to add 2 weeks from the full moon. Cause like if you look on a calendar, it always says full moon, but it never tells you the new moon. And it's 2 weeks. And that's the week I just kind of like, okay, I'm going to rest. I need to do more journaling. Maybe I'm spending more time in scripture, getting a little bit more in tune, reflective. I'm looking back and saying like, what do I need to correct? Where am I going? It's such a beautiful way of living.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful way of living to give that pause. That menstruation is really that pause. And I would love it if we could ever figure out, society, um, about giving women those days. Like if you need to rest,
Mm-hmm.
I heard an entrepreneur said this was the best thing about leaving the world of employment was that I get to choose. I'm going to rest during my periods. She said because there were so many times I had to take PTO and my boss, even though I had all the PTO, my boss just considered me weak because I literally needed to be in bed for 2 days. Now, that's a little bit drastic, and I would say you probably have a little bit of hormonal disorder or something if you're so unfunctional during your
Mm-hmm.
menstruation, you know. But the fact that she was able to give herself that space as an entrepreneur,
Yes.
we're not that lucky. And that's the beautiful thing about homeschooling too, right?
Yes.
You're like, hey guys, you guys are going to do this today, and I'm just going to choose to do a light work and not beat ourselves up because, I just know this is the day or whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of plug that into full moon and new moon for those of us who are older, and because I'm sure you've got listeners that are,
Yes, either there or coming up on that. I mean, even us, I think we're coming up on that and not that far away. The years are going a lot faster now than they used to be. But I'm glad you added that. And I think, too, something homeschooling affords us is the ability to give that to our daughters. One of my daughters is like a laser guided missile towards her brother. It's so predictable. And I'm like, oh, I see that you need something else right now. Like I can see you're harping on him and going after him and being constantly frustrated with him. Like that's an outward sign that I'm picking up on, but it's helped me to be able to say, hey, when you're in this part of your cycle, you tend to be a little bit less patient. You tend to need a little more space to yourself. And that's okay to take that. No, learn your body to know, hey, actually, we live in 1,800 square feet with 9 people and a dog, and that can get real small real fast when you're in certain parts of your cycle, okay? So because of that now I've been able to help them understand their bodies more, and it is just so empowering to be able to do those things. And I'm coming for you when I hit perimenopause, so be ready for me, Mama Jane. I'm coming for you.
I'm I'm ready. I like this was the hard part about really figuring out like who, we always talk about our niche, right? Like our,
Yes.
who's our avatar, whatever. I'm like, girls, like if you have a period, I can talk to you. And even if you don't have a period, like if you're a woman, I can talk to you. I can help you in somehow, some way. But that's where I see there's not as many support
Hmm.
in that
Yeah.
age,
Definitely there is not.
and you're right, there's more people that are, more women are slowly coming into that, and
Hmm.
wouldn't it be great if we could kind of prepare them just like we're preparing our young girls right now. We're all of
Yes.
a sudden waking up and saying,
Hmm.
I'm going to prepare you because this is a gift.
Hmm.
And that's the thing we need to remember is that our cycle is our gift. It's what makes us women. And our bodies are magnificent and beautiful. And it doesn't matter what size you are, it doesn't matter how old you are. God loves each and every one of us in a unique way. And He loves us as women. Ooh.
Preach. I love it. Oh my gosh. I know we are coming to the end. I am so grateful for all the wisdom you have shared with us so far. Before we come to a close, we always ask our guests a few questions. So we'll throw those at you. And then I know there are going to be listeners out there who are like, give me more Mama Jane. So I'll have you tell all of our listeners too about all the things you've got going on, where we can find you and everything. So the first question is, what do you think your mom superpower is?
Oh, I think my mom's superpower is the ability to care for others when they don't have the space or the person to care for them.
Oh,
That's beautiful.
I love that.
I know when someone is supposed to see me when they come and say, I knew you were the only one I could talk to about this.
Oh.
Then I know I'm in my zone. I know the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit, like, okay, Holy Spirit, this is, a holy moment because that's who I am.
And you're so approachable.
Yeah.
Gosh, you do make people feel so
Yeah.
comfortable and so loved around you. I would definitely say that's your superpower.
Yes. Holy cow. Okay. So if you could go back to one stage of your motherhood and tell yourself one thing, what stage would you go back to and what would you say?
I think I would start at the beginning when I was first pregnant with my first daughter, who is 36. And I would share with her not only the gift, I mean, I knew it was a gift, but maybe after pregnancy, because I have a sinking feeling that I had postpartum depression
Mm.
looking back. And I would love on her. I would love on her the way I needed to be loved on. That now I'm able to love on others because of that,
Yeah.
and love on her body because my body changed so much. I was in the military at the time. That was just psychological warfare.
Yes. I can imagine.
So yeah, I think that's what I would do. I would love on her postpartum.
That means a lot. All right, what are 4 things your friends or family would say you're good at?
Talking. My husband, when we used to do marriage prep, he would say, Jane's gift is she meets someone and she acts like they're her best friend from day one. Like she just loves on people. I don't have an enemy. Like I don't
Oh.
know. I never, everyone is my friend. So that's one thing my husband says. My children say that, yeah, I'm a crazy sanguine, lots of energy.
Respect.
Yeah. Melancholic here. I love penguins.
But I attract a lot of melancholics for my
Mhm.
clients because I can get down. I have 52% melancholic. I can get down and feel the sorrow with you
Yeah.
and stay there with you. But then also I'm like, okay, now we need to get up back up.
Yeah.
Now let's get out of there a little bit,
There's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. I think my friends would probably say, and I don't really even want to say this. This sounds really boastful, but I think my friends would say that I have a very deep spiritual life,
Mm.
and that's what attracts them to me is that because of my own spiritual journey, I can help them.
That is a
Yeah.
very, very beautiful thing
It is.
to be good at.
And you're clearly attracting the right type of friends.
Yes. Truly, yes.
Okay, and finally, what is something that makes your family special?
Oh, what makes my family special? I think it because, and we've talked about this. We had this conversation at Christmas. My family is like three separate families because I had my first daughter, and then we had these 7 years of infertility,
Mhm.
and then we had three, and then we had a miscarriage, and then my youngest I had at 42, and so he's 4 years apart. So he feels like he was an only child, even though he did go to school. So that's unique. But we also, we played both sides. We were homeschoolers and we were public school, so we can see both.
Yeah. That is a very unique perspective. And I think it gives you special insight. I think that puts you in a very good position to minister to all of these different women and mamas who come to you. And for all of our listeners, I knew Mama Jane from a mutual Catholic business coaching group, and I have just loved you ever since I first met you. I just think you're amazing, and I'm so pleased to have you here. Go ahead and tell all of our listeners where they can best find you.
So the best would be to listen to my podcast, Cycles and Sanctity. It drops on Thursdays. The subtitle is How a Catholic Woman Can Use Her Cycle Towards Holiness. And then I'm on Instagram, Mama Jane 25. I'm on Facebook, which I tend to be on, Jane Snyder 25. And then I have my website, wisdomwellnesscoaching.net. We do have a Facebook group for our podcast. They can always join that and get in, have a little bit of DM or whatever. And at the moment, I'm really, because of the love that I want to pour out, I am really focusing on one on one coaching. I want to pour in to each individual one at a time. That's what the Lord has shown me is like, go find the one. If I can change the one, then all glory to God.
I think that also makes people feel probably very comfortable coming to you, knowing that it's obviously a lot of times very personal stuff that they're bringing. And it's a very comforting thing to know that you can get one on one coaching with you. And you're dabbling in the perimenopause and the menopause. I say dabbling in, you're jumping in to all of that. So that's really exciting. Are you talking about that on the podcast and moving forward in that way? Or do you have a course coming? Or are you just doing the one on one coaching for that?
I'm doing basically kind of a course, but through one on one. The Catholic way to navigate through menopause with grace. That's really my
Ooh.
focus. In the podcast, we're actually using the 4 seasons for the continuum. So right now, we're kind of going into pre puberty and puberty, the spring
Mhm.
of a woman's life. Then the summer, we're going to go into marriage and all that stuff. And we finished fall and winter was the perimenopause and postmenopausal stuff. So we have episodes on that, and it has been really resonating. It's kind of where I like woke up and smelled the coffee like, oh my goodness, I have all these ladies. They're like, yes, we need you.
Cheering from
Okay,
the
girls,
rooftop.
I'm here.
That is Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Well, gosh, thank you so much for sharing all of
No,
your
thank
joy,
you.
your sanguine joy with us, and all of your wisdom. You have been such a treasure to have on the podcast. And I love what you are doing. I love how you're ministering to these women and how you are giving a voice to so many different things that need a voice right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have to share just one more thing because Brittany, you've inspired me. You guys have really, you've inspired me. And like I said, I'm like, oh my goodness, where were you? So yeah, I
Thank
recommend you all. And I love your recipes. I love your Instagram posts of making breakfast burritos and all the cool things.
you. Thank you, Mama Jane. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, God bless you and have a very holy Lent.
Thank you.
That
You as
is
well.
Yeah.
my theme is walking gently through the desert with the Lord. That's the theme of postmenopause is gentleness.
I feel like my theme is being dragged behind a wagon this year, but
I'm driving the
Well,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
but
The
yes,
Lord's
please pray for me.
He's gonna meet us where we're at, right?
That's right. Yes. My little feet are moving like Fred Flintstones.
Keep
Oh,
up, keep up.
yeah.
Come on. Yes.
Oh gosh.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Sweet mamas, as always, thank you so much for tuning in, for listening, for sitting down on these conversations with us, or probably standing up, rocking babies, nursing babies, and maybe even homeschooling kids or driving to and from. Before you go today, we just wanted to ask you if you would take a few minutes to review our podcast. Your reviews, first of all, mean so much to us. We read every single one, but they also help our podcast get out to more women. You can leave a review with stars, or you can write a review, and those are our favorites. Here's one we just got recently from Keith Mo 7. The title is A Podcast for All, and thank you, Keith Mo 7, for the 5 stars. She says, I am a working mom, and for so long, I didn't think I would need this podcast, even seeing friends share it. I was so wrong. It's fantastic. Simple advice, encouragement, and systems to make life peacefully and happy for stay-at-home moms or away-at-work moms. I love that there isn't any judgment. You can hear the heart behind everything they share. Really empowering for women. Keith Mo, thank you so much. That definitely made our day, and we're so appreciative for you taking time out of your busy day because we know how much time is valued amongst moms. So thank you for taking a few minutes, and sweet mamas who are our listeners, if you could take a few minutes also and leave us a review, we would be incredibly appreciative. One more thing before you go. We currently have 2 new things in our shop for our homeschool mamas. One is a homeschool plan like a mother guide, and the other is an editable template for our homeschool clipboards that if you're following us on Instagram, you've definitely seen recently because people have been going crazy over them. So if you're interested in either one, you can pop over to our shop by clicking the link in our show notes or going to our shop at www.thedeliberateday.org. And one last thing, sweet mamas. You are doing beautiful work. Even if you don't feel like it right now, you are doing beautiful work.
Hey, before you go, I have a question to ask you. Have you joined our Facebook group page, Cycles and Sanctity? Well, we want you to go ahead and go over to Facebook and just look up Cycles and Sanctity and come on and join our group, and we can continue having this conversation over there.